Thank you for tuning into another episode of Teen Gen Talks podcast, where the goal is to empower the youth of Glendale and connect you to community resources, individuals, and organizations through interviews and discussions. I'm your host, Melissa.
And I'm Desiree. And we had the pleasure of talking to Crystal. Crystal is a young adult author with a lot of feelings. Her debut novel, Fat Chance Charlie Vega, is a 2021 New England Book Award winner, a Cosmopolitan Best New Book, and a Pop Sugar Best New YA novel. Her next novel, No Filter and Other Lies, explores teenage life in the social media age and the lies we tell ourselves and others. By day, Crystal works in higher ed marketing, and by night, a writer who loves Beyonce, shopping, spending too much time on her phone, and being extra. Her work has also been published in Latina, BuzzFeed, and Hartford Courant. Hope you enjoy our interview with Crystal.
Thank you, Crystal, for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. We have a lot to discuss.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So to start off the interview, do you remember a moment in your life when you were growing up that you fell in love with writing?
Oh, that is such a good question. I feel like I spent so much time as a kid in the library and like at bookstores. And I feel like we spent a lot of time at the library because my family was like this, you have to be quiet when you go to the library. So it was like my family, like my aunt especially, she'd be like, you kids are driving me nuts. Let's go to the library. Let's get some books. And she'd get her peace and quiet. And that is sort of when I fell in love with reading and this idea of just like, oh my God, there's so much that can happen in these stories. And I loved getting lost in them. And I just was such like a natural daydreamer that kind of translated into when I was in school and they would ask us to, you have to do those preparations for like those like statewide tests where you're the standardized tests, each state has their own thing. And you have to learn to write essays even when you're like, I don't know, 8 years old. And so like, I remember being in 3rd grade and my teacher being like, okay, we're going to write essays. And I'm like, what is an essay? Like, what even is this? And they gave us a writing prompt and it was something like, I don't know, you lean against a tree and the tree turns out to be magical and you like fall through a hole and you go into a different dimension and then continue the story. And I was like, this is the greatest piece of homework I've ever gotten. And I was just like writing, asking for more paper. And everybody else was done in like, 10, 15 minutes. And here I am, I'm like, excuse me, I need more because I need to keep writing. And so like, that's, I feel like when I realized, oh, maybe I enjoy doing this for like fun, right? It's something more than just, a class assignment. So it's been a while.
So in your early writing journey, do you remember what some of those first short stories that you wrote about were about?
So I wrote a lot of like, just like stories where I would insert myself into things I had read. And so it would be like, oh, I'm reading this really cool story about, like, I remember we read the story, King Midas, like the golden touch, where everything you touch turns to gold. And for some reason, my little kid brain was obsessed with hearts and was like, wouldn't it be cool if everything you touched had like a heart pattern on it? So I still have the story somewhere. And that was like my version of King Midas. It was like this little chubby brown girl. She's like, has a magical touch and everything she touches turns to hearts. And then when I got a little bit older, this is really embarrassing, guys, like don't judge me for it. But when I got into middle school, I was really into boy bands. And so I started writing boy band fan fiction. I know.
No, I love that.
That was like,
that's amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for not judging me. That was like my first kind of like, I was experimenting though with like what would eventually become, my YA young adult writing career. I was writing romance. It was just like cringy boy band romance. And I was like one of the characters and they all fall in love with me, obviously.
No, I understand that. I think we all went through that phase.
Right? Thank you.
I mean, yeah. No, but it's actually like interesting because like a lot of like, people like on Wattpad, like they use that as
Yes.
to hone in their craft, and like it could result in something, like you never know.
Yeah. Don't listen. If anyone ever tells you there's like fan fiction, there's no place for that, it's not true, because that's where you kind of start learning about stories. So write your fan fiction, and then maybe someday you get published.
Right. Yeah, you never know. But speaking about like honing in your craft and stuff, and writing, how did you do that? How did you kind of perfect your writing?
It took a lot of trial and error, I'm not gonna lie. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out like what is my voice, right? And what is the writing that resonates with me? What does that sound like? And who do I want to be as a writer? So for me, I tried on a lot of different voices in my writing styles, and had to figure out what worked for me. And I had to go through a lot of I basically had to try on a lot of voices that didn't work. So I read a lot of like adult fiction and like literary fiction, and I tried my hand kind of at writing that, and it just didn't feel natural. It always felt like I was trying so hard to sound really smart, and it just didn't feel right to me. And it wasn't until I started kind of experimenting with my voice and writing the way kind of similar to how I talk and think and how I talk with my friends, that it felt like that was the voice. And that was exactly what I had been missing. Was I had been missing that piece that felt authentic, and that piece that really felt like I was getting to the heart of like the emotions. And so once I found that, and I had spent all that time experimenting, then I could think more about like, okay, what tense do I want to write in? Like, do I want to write in present tense or past tense? And do I want to write in first person, or do I want to write in third person? And like, how do we want to build these emotions in? So then I could think about like the nitty gritty stuff, but it took forever. Like I couldn't look at any of that until I could first figure out how I actually wanted to sound and what sort of genre felt right to me. And so for me, I fell into like the contemporary genre for young adult. And I read so many books where I was like, God, this just feels right. And it feels so good and emotional. And I love it. And I loved the journey, like following the characters and going on that journey with them. And so once I started experimenting with that, it felt just like home. Like it felt exactly like where I was supposed to be with my writing.
So what made you want to actually take the leap into becoming a published writer?
Oh God, I think time made me want to take the leap. So I had always wanted to be a published author, but I thought, I'm not gonna lie, like I thought that was for like wealthy white men. And I didn't know if like I didn't know if like poor brown girls could like become published authors. I didn't know anybody in publishing. I had no idea how to even kind of get started. And so I was writing these stories and just kind of like they were just dying in my Google Drive. And I'd be like, well, that was fun. Let's move on. And so one year, I started working on the original like draft of Fat Chance Charlie Vega. And since it was based on kind of my love story with my husband in real life, that was the one that kind of had the most like legs. And it was one I just kept coming back to because it was so like, it was something I really, really enjoyed. So once I finished that story, it felt so real to me. And I was like, I want to do something with this. I want to try something. And I turned 30. And it was like, once I hit 30, I thought, what do I have to lose? Right? Like right now I have a finished story that's just sitting completed on my computer, and it's doing nothing. And even if I fail, at least I'll have tried. Right. Because up until that point, I was so consumed with failure and this idea that I might not succeed that I was too afraid to even try. And so by the time, once I hit my 30s, I was like, okay, my 20s, I let myself be afraid and be nervous. And now I'm entering my 30s and I just want to try and do things and be okay with failing. And so once I got to that point where I thought, okay, even if nobody reads this story, at least at least I read this story and at least I believed in it. Then that was like the point where I was able to like be brave enough to start submitting it to other places and to let other people read it. Because it is super vulnerable when you create anything, not just writing, but like, I don't know, art, songs, music, whatever it is, like it's so vulnerable to share that with other people. So it, you know, it takes a lot and you have to be okay with someone not liking it, which is terrifying, or of you not doing a good job, which is also terrifying. So you kind of have to, for me, I had to get to that point where I was like, well, I'm doing this for me. And if no one else, if it doesn't resonate with anyone else, that's okay. Because it meant something to me.
What did your journey to getting published look like? And how did you find, I guess, the right publishing company to work with you?
So I honestly, I'm going to be honest, I had no connections and no clue what I was doing. So I like to say that because it's true. And I hope it helps other people feel like they can do it too. Because sometimes, like, at least for me, I thought, oh, you need to know somebody, right? Or you need to know at least what you're doing before you just kind of leap and try to get published. So I truly started by writing the story that, you know, was in my heart, the story I felt really passionate about, and getting a completed manuscript. And really, I think that is the hardest part, is like the actual writing and finishing it. And so I had to keep reminding myself, like, you're writing this for you, and it's okay if it's similar to other stories because you're doing your own twist on it. And so then once I had that final, you know, version of the manuscript, I truly turned to Google and I was like, I wrote a book and now what do I do? And like, I'm Googling this frantically as like, just because I had no idea where to start. So it, you know, obviously Google never steers me wrong, except when I'm Googling my medical symptoms and everything's like, you're dying, right? We all know what that's like. But in this case, it was like, okay, if you would like to do traditional publishing, here's kind of steps 1 through 5. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna follow these instructions. I'm gonna try and write. Basically, you start by finding a literary agent, somebody who connects with your work, and then once you find them and they're interested in your manuscript, then it gets a lot easier to try and find a publisher who is interested in your work. So that was where I started because, like I said, I just had no knowledge of the industry and I really wanted to partner with someone who believed in my work and also knew what they were doing. And I could say, like, I trust you to help me. So to find someone, like to find an agent that felt right, I started by looking up, like Googling agents who were interested in representing marginalized stories. So in Fat Chance Charlie Vega, Charlie is fat, she's Puerto Rican, she obviously is a girl. So that she has all of these things kind of that are part of her identity. And in the story, she explores her identity. And it's a similar thing for my second book, No Filter and Other Lies. Kat has those same things and kind of is going through her identity as well. And so I knew that that was an important piece of whatever book I was going to write. And so I wanted to find an agent who could understand that element of it and who really appreciated that piece of the story and could appreciate that about me too, right? Like I didn't want somebody who was like, oh, you know, the book's great, but we have to change everything about the main character, right? Like that was, that's my worst nightmare. So I really wanted to find someone who could connect with that piece of Charlie. And then hopefully they would also have that same like appreciation for me as just a human and a person. So that's kind of where I started out. I just wanted to find someone who was interested in marginalized stories. And I was like, I will make a list of like 5 agents. I'm going to query them and I'm going to start there. And then when I inevitably get rejected, I'll go on to the next 5 agents and then I'll just keep doing it like that. But weirdly, within that first round of agents I queried, I heard back from one and she was like, oh, like I'm interested and this sounds good. Can you send me your full manuscript? And I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest day of my life. And so we went back and forth, and she helped me kind of clean the manuscript up. And then we eventually signed a deal together because she just completely got what I was trying to do with Charlie Vega, and she understood like who Charlie was as a character, and it just felt like she believed so much in the story and in me, even though I didn't have any connections. I was not someone who had been published in literary magazines or anything. Like I had nothing. I was like, I work at a university and I do social media, right? Like I had no connections to publishing. But she was like, I got you, girl. Like we're gonna do this together. So once I signed with her, I put so much like trust, like I really trusted her. And her name's Tamar, and she's still my agent. I love her so much. And she was like, okay, here's how we're gonna pitch this out, and we're gonna go on sub. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but okay, Tamar, like I'm here, I'm here for the ride. And she's telling me like, okay, we're gonna start with this publisher and this one. And so she did all the hard work, and she would just give me updates like, okay, we got rejected from this place. We got rejected from this place. I got rejected so many times. And I want to share that because like it does stink to get rejected, but it's also just part of the process. And eventually, to me, like eventually you're going to find someone who loves your story. And to me, the rejections were just like putting me one step closer to the right publisher who was going to love the story and want to keep it as it was and really celebrate it. And so Tamar would send me some of the rejections. She'd be like, do you want to see like what they said about the book? And I was such a glutton for punishment. I was like, yeah, send them my way. And so she'd email me these like rejection letters from the editors. And I'd be like, oh my God, we got rejected from Disney. That's so cool. Someone from Disney read my book. And so all of it just felt like such a win. I was like, oh, this is just awesome. And then of course it got even better when we heard back from Holiday House, which is my current publisher. And they were very much interested in Charlie's story and in, keeping her identity intact and like just really celebrating this like fat brown girl love story and making the most of it. And that like the way that they talked about the book just totally sold me on them. And they were so caring and like appreciative of me as a new author, and they wanted to walk me through everything and kind of like talk me through, how do you market yourself and how do you do interviews? And because I was, again, new to all that, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so it was nice to have that support. And then, they offered a 2-book deal. And so that was like a dream come true. And I feel like I got really lucky with that. Because that's not everyone's experience. Like I've heard from some authors who, they sign and, the publisher's like, this is great, but can we make them like a little less Latina, or can we make them more stereotypical Latina? And it's like, nobody wants that kind of comment on their book, right? You wrote the character as you did for a reason, and you want someone to get it and appreciate it.
I think you touched a little bit about it, but what was the writing process like for Fat Chance Charlie Vega? And did you get any writer's block during that time?
So I feel like the best way to talk about Charlie is to compare it to how I wrote No Filter and Other Lies, because they were totally different. And so I thought with Charlie Vega, I'm like, oh my God, I am going to embrace like being a writer. I'm like going to go to coffee shops and I'm going to bring my little laptop and I'm going to make it a whole thing and like curate a vibe, right? Like, and with your first book, you have all the time in the world. You can do that, right? Because there's no deadline. It's however long it takes you to write the book. That's how long it takes you to write the book. So for me, it took about 2 years. I definitely had times where I was like writing every day because the inspiration was there. And then I remember like about halfway through the book, just kind of hitting a dead end. And I'm like, I don't know where I want to take this from here. And I was still so new to the process that I hadn't quite outlined everything. Like I had a vague idea of what I wanted to happen, but I didn't have every single, story beat kind of written out. I was just like, I'm just going on vibes and feelings. And as it turns out, that can be hard when you you get halfway through and you're like, where are the vibes and feelings taking me now? So I definitely hit my writer's block, but like eventually, because I didn't have a deadline and I was doing this just like for fun, I got back into it, thankfully, and was able to sort of finish it. Compared to No Filter and Other Lies, I had a deadline that I had to hit, and it was a pandemic. And all of a sudden, I was also a mom. Like I had, I had a 2-year-old, and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Like I'm working full time. I'm doing all this stuff. And I hit so many writer's blocks. Like I swear, writing that book was like pulling teeth. And I think it was because of everything else that was going on. And so even though I was so good. I did an outline. I'm like, this is going to be easy. Actually writing it took so much energy. And I wrote it in about like 6 or 7 months. So like a fraction of the time that I had written Charlie. And so I'm sure that played a part in it too. But oh my God, it was so much harder the second time around. But then since then, I've drafted a 3rd book and it wasn't as bad. So I'm like, maybe it was just the pandemic getting the best of me. But like in my dream world, I would always be writing with those like coffee house vibes, like my little Spotify playlist, right? We're like, oh, I'm the main character and I'm curating those feelings. But sometimes it's not like that. And you're just like, okay, I'm hungry, I'm stressed out, and now I'm like typing and I'm like hunched over like a little shrimp at my, you take what you can get.
Right. And then in Fat Chance Charlie Vega, not only did you create a story that was realistic with beautifully imperfect characters, but you also reclaimed the word fat. So can you talk a bit more about the book? I know you've already touched upon it, but if you could talk more about it.
Absolutely. So in talking about like the book itself and how I had no idea if I'd ever get published, when I was writing it, I thought, okay, if I only get this one book, what is it that I want the message to be? And what do I want to include in that? So obviously, a big part of that story is just Charlie being fat and brown and beautiful and like realizing that she is beautiful and worthy of love and finding that love, not just romantically, but also for herself, right? Like that we watch her kind of as she's kind of falling in love with herself. And so that was, I think, like the heart of what I wanted in this story was I wanted it to be I wanted to show the story of somebody who is fat and is brown and gets to be desired without having to lose weight, but also have this main character really appreciate who she is, right? Because of course, like it's wonderful if you fall in love and it's reciprocal, but you also want to have that like appreciation for yourself and you want to have that love come from within. So that was kind of my main goal in writing this story. And so in thinking about that, the other piece of it was this word, this like 3-letter word, fat. And like, what do we want to do with this word? And for so much of my life, as I've always been like a bigger person, I've always been like a chubby little kid. And fat was like such a bad word in my house. And it was, always an insult and never something I wanted to be called. And so it felt like this like swear word or this word we just like didn't say. And then I kind of found the body positivity movement and the fat acceptance movement through places like social media and Tumblr back in the day. And just being able to see other people reclaim this term that had been so painful for me felt really empowering and really just powerful. And suddenly this word that I had been running away from and that I had been kind of, so hurt by, I could use it to describe myself and have it sort of take away all of those painful parts of it, because now it was just a descriptor, right? The same way I would say I'm brown, or I have curly hair, or I wear glasses, I would say I'm fat. And it didn't sting and it didn't hurt and it didn't make me want to cry. And that was so moving to me, because it finally, like, I was getting to kind of call the shots on that. And I was like, people are going to call me fat regardless. But if I call myself fat, there's something powerful in that. And so when I'm thinking about Charlie's story, I thought, wouldn't it be kind of beautiful if this girl also reclaims that word, and we have that right there in the title. So like, right when you pick it up, like what you are getting into, like, this is a fat girl story, and you're going to get to know her and hopefully appreciate her and feel like she's a friend of yours, or you relate to her, or whatever it is. And so whether you're fat or not, I hope the book gives kind of this insight into what it's like to live as a fat person and what that kind of looks like, and maybe helps people appreciate their own bodies and really come to terms with their worth and realize like how much they deserve.
So did you ever feel the underlying pressure in, especially when there isn't many Latin authors in the mainstream media?
Oh my God, all the time. That is such a good, perfect question, especially during Latina Heritage Month, right? Like, we're talking about Latinx Heritage Month. It's like the pressure is on to feel like you need to speak for everyone who's part of your identity. And the wild thing is, we're all so different, and we all have such different experiences. Like, especially speaking as like a Latina person, like, I am Puerto Rican, but I didn't grow up in Puerto Rico. I don't speak Spanish. I grew up in kind of a white town. So my experience as a Puerto Rican is going to be way different than someone who grew up like as a Boricua on the island speaking the language. And there is not one experience that's more legitimate or not legitimate. They're just different experiences, right? Like, and all of these experiences are valid and they make up who we are. But there is a lot of pressure when you're like the only of whatever it is. Like, it doesn't even have to just be, you're the only Latina, or you're the only girl, like you're the only girl, or you're the only tall person, or you're the only whatever. Suddenly you represent, they're like, well, you're the spokesperson for that whole group. And you're like, me? I didn't ask for this. Yeah. It's a lot of pressure. And so I try to like not get in my head about it and just try to remind myself, you're just speaking from your experience, and that's every bit as valid as everyone else's.
And the covers of your books are so pretty and they just look so nice. So how is that process in creating the covers for your books?
Okay, I'm going to put them up close. So like, this is our girl, Charlie. Look how cute she is. And then this is our other girl, Kat. She's also so cute. So both of the covers were done by the same artist. She's also Puerto Rican, which I'm like, when has there ever been like Puerto Rican author, illustrator, and character in a book? I don't know. I feel like it's some kind of record or something, but I could be wrong. But her name's Erica Lugo. And so when she first came, and Holiday House was the one, like my publisher was the one that knew of her and knew of her work. And they knew how important my identity is to me and how important that was to Charlie's story. So they went out of their way to try and pair me up with, I almost said us as if Charlie's like a real person. So they went out of their way to pair me up with the Puerto Rican illustrator for that reason, right? To try and be like, let's make sure we have as much representation as we can. And because I was so just excited about everything, I was like, I have no opinions on what it should look like. Just whatever you give me, I will be so happy with. So Erica kind of just got to do whatever she wanted. And she gave us, I want to say 3 different versions of what the cover could be. And so one was of Charlie and her best friend Amelia, and they were kind of like hugging each other. And one was of Charlie and Amelia standing kind of back to back and like looking in opposite directions. And then the third one was the cover we ultimately went with, which was Charlie, and she had all these beautiful flowers kind of around her. So I loved all of them. And I was like, I am having such a hard time choosing because they're all so perfect. But we had a lot of discussions about it and ultimately went with the one of just Charlie because we thought, God, how powerful would it be to have this fat brown girl wearing her glasses, wearing her like cute little curly hair and looking happy and beautiful on this cover. And and then have like the flowers behind her. We talked about this idea of kind of Charlie blooming throughout the story and how it shows that she's really coming into her own. And so having that and just being able to have input into like, the peachy color is beautiful. Let's go with that one. I was so excited to have that, have that level of involvement. And then, so for that cover, that was the most input I had, was like getting to pick one of the 3. And then for No Filter, truly Erica just nailed it. Like that cover that you see on the book is the cover she came to us with as a concept. And we were like, yup, it's perfect. You're amazing. And you killed it. And that was it. Like she got the coloring, all of it was just perfect from the beginning. And so, sometimes you just get really lucky. And I feel like I got really lucky with an illustrator who knows how to like capture these characters and capture the elements. And yeah, it's great.
So you also work in higher ed marketing. What about marketing drew you into the field?
I feel like I actually kind of stumbled into marketing. So I went to school for journalism and English because I loved writing. And I thought, well, if I'll never be a published author, which was the dream, I was like, what else can I do as a career with writing? So I started out as a journalist. I was a newspaper reporter for a while, doing small town news, going to meetings and town meetings and all that kind of stuff. And it was a great experience, but not what I wanted to be writing, right? Like clearly not. So it was good to get my start and to figure out how to, write clean copy. And also I was so shy when I graduated college. It forced me to talk to people. And so I needed that little push. So from there, I worked in a couple of different newsrooms, and back then I was like the newbie in the newsroom. And so I knew about Twitter and like how to use digital cameras. And those were like new things back then. Like I'm dating myself, but I swear to God, nobody knew how to use cameras. Nobody had like camera phones the way we do. And so I was teaching people how to use social media and here's how you tweet out your story. Here's like what a hashtag is and whatever. And so I kept kind of being that person in each of the roles that I had. And then as it turned out, there was a whole career that was kind of emerging at that time in social media. And so it was like, oh, all my time on Twitter is actually going to pay off and it's going to become a career. Wonderful. So that was how I ended up in social media marketing, was truly just from it being something I was passionate about and I was using, to live tweet about Scandal. Now, all of a sudden at my job, I'm teaching other people how to use these social media platforms. And that's how I ended up doing it for higher ed and doing it for colleges. And it was really fun because it kind of like had me flex my creative muscles in a different way. Like, how do you encapsulate everything that's happening in just a couple of characters for a tweet? Or how do you capture the perfect photo for Instagram? And how do you do this storytelling without any words, right? Because it's so visual. And so it was nice to kind of turn my brain off from the words and have this other piece of creativity where I could explore through like visual mediums and things like that. And it was honestly the best. I got to like do a live stream of Shaquille O'Neal coming to our campus one time. And yeah, and then I like, so I'm doing this live stream and they were like, absolutely no photos. Like you cannot take a picture with him if you're working the event. And I waited and waited. And then I hopped into the line and I got a picture with Shaquille O'Neal anyway, because I was like, I am not having Shaq come to this campus and me not get a picture. Like we're getting a photo, right? Come on.
Yes.
So it's been fun, and I think it can be really nice to like have this hobby that becomes something you're actually doing for your day job. Like what I get paid to scroll on social media and create posts. That sounds, I never would have thought that could be a real job, you know?
Yeah. And your second novel, No Filter and Other Lies, how did the idea for this book come to be? And did you know from the beginning you wanted to tackle on like the realities of social media, like FOMO and racial exclusion on social media?
That's a really good question. I knew that I wanted to do something related to like online friendships, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to tackle it. So my original, like very early iterations of the idea, I kind of wanted to base it on a friend that I had made when I was a lot younger. And we met over America Online way back in the day, AOL Instant Messenger. We were buddies and we became like real friends. Like we're still actually friends and we've met up a bunch of times in real life. But back then there was all this weirdness around making friends through social media, right? Like they were like, don't use your real name, don't tell people anything real about you. And now obviously it's completely different. But I just wanted to kind of celebrate the idea that you can find yourself through online friendships and that you can actually sometimes feel more yourself when you're online than when you're in real life, because sometimes it strips away like those feelings of insecurity and you can just feel more like at home. And so it was like, how do you explain what America Online is in a book? And I have tried so hard, but like, how do you encapsulate, like, it's this thing where you have to hook up a phone. It was so confusing. So I was like, forget this. We're not gonna set this in like the early 2000s. We're gonna update it and have it be like a modern day take on this. And it actually ended up being something that was a lot easier to do than I thought, because I have the career kind of working in social media and it was something I like to do anyway. It just felt natural to sort of take this on. And I think a lot of us can relate to the idea of scrolling through our social feeds and feeling like everyone else is living their best life and we're on the couch and alone and just like, why am I seeing these pictures and I feel so weird and I feel like a loser right now, when really like they are probably posting those pictures from their couch too. It's just like, you know, like we're all just envying each other. And I thought that was really fascinating, right? This idea that we're all curating this like perfect life, but also sometimes it's like not so perfect behind the scenes. And how does that sort of play out, especially when you're a brown person on social media? And, you know, we've seen things where brown folks, they get shadow banned or their posts don't get pushed out as much as, you know, white influencers. And that has very real implications and kind of ties into the idea that we live in this racist society still, and that there's institutional structures that really press against us. And so I wanted to explore, like, when you're a teenager and you're just like trying to make friends and survive, how does that all feel? And how does that affect your perception of yourself? Especially when you can see like numbers wise, how
Mm.
many followers you have. Like, that's so devastating, right? Like for Kat, she's like, oh my God, my guy friends don't even care about social media and they have 3 times the followers I do.
Mm.
Why? That's so unfair. I could really relate to that.
Do you have any tips on making, like your social media experiences more positive and healthy?
Yes. So I used to be such a doom scroller. I don't know if anyone else has had this problem, but like falling down a rabbit hole of I'm just like, I'm miserable and I can't stop. And I'm just, oh, now I'm mad and I'm going down and I'm like clicking on a friend of a friend. And it's like, well, why does she have this cool life? She was mean to me that one time. And so things that I have done to like get away from that have been to unfollow anybody or really any type of account that brings on those negative feelings for me. So I unfollowed a lot of like a Cosmopolitan magazine, like no shade to Cosmo. We've all loved Cosmo, but like things that made me feel bad about myself as a person, or things that made me feel bad about my body, or people who I didn't feel like were being real on these social platforms, right? They're always sharing the good and you're never seeing the bad. Okay, well, that's going to make me feel terrible because I'm going to feel like, oh, I'm the only one who ever has sad days or bad days. So I am a big fan of like liberally unfollowing or muting people, because we all know politics. And sometimes it's like, well, if I unfollow this person, they're going to know, and I don't want to fight with them in real life because we're real life friends, but maybe on social, they're not so great. So they never know if you mute them. So that's okay. And if it's for your mental health, it's okay to do that. And then also finding like following hashtags and going like diving deep into those that align with the things you're interested in. So finding the body positivity hashtag and falling down that rabbit hole, finding the Black girl magic hashtag, the Latina hashtag, whatever it is that like you love, whether it's like ADHD tips, neuroatypical tips, like things like that, where you can find your people and find others who are like you. It really is life-changing, because suddenly your feed is now surrounded, like it's full of people who are like you, and you and your experience don't feel so weird, right? Because that, as I think we're all like chasing that feeling of just belonging, and that can be really hard because we're all so different. So the more we can sort of seek out those communities that feel like home, I think the more our social media feels more welcoming to us. So don't feel bad about doing that.
And what is something you would tell any teen or young adult who wants to be an author?
I would tell any teen or young adult who wants to be an author to read a lot, find out what you like, but also don't be ashamed to find out what you don't like. That's important too. And I mean, if you find out that you love horror, that's wonderful. But if you read horror and you're like, this is the worst thing I've ever read and I never want to read it again, that's good to know too. And so it's good to just read widely, find out like, what is it that makes you excited, right? Like, what is a page turner for you? What like makes you think? What makes you want to tell your friends like, oh my God, I just read this book and it's so good and here's why. So like keep track of that stuff. And it doesn't even have to just be books. It can be movies, it can be TV shows, it can be podcasts, but like finding the things that make you happy will really affect what you create and how you create it. And so that is my number one. And my number two is really, it's like a silly thing, but remembering that whatever it is that you're gonna write, sometimes you're gonna have these moments of feeling like an imposter, and sometimes you're gonna worry your story is too similar to something out there. But that's not true, because nobody is going to write a story the same way that you are, and you deserve to have your voice heard. So do it. Sit down, do the writing and share it, because there's going to be someone out there who eventually will pick up your story or pick up your book or pick up your poem, and they're going to think, oh my God, this was written for me. And that's honestly the best feeling in the world.
And to you, what does all of this mean, especially being a Latina storyteller and being able to voice in YA literature and make the Latinx community be seen?
That to me is exactly like why I wanted to become a writer and wanted to become an author, was to connect to other people who worried that they weren't enough or that they needed to change things about themselves, to connect with those people who, you know, they watched a movie and they were like, this is great, but it's not showing me, right? And who really needed something to feel like they mattered and they belonged. And so I'm trying to just write these, you know, Latina stories, these fat girl stories that celebrate who we are, that celebrate our joy, that celebrate our ups and downs, and that just celebrate us and remind us that we absolutely deserve to be happy, to be loved, that we're worthy, and that we can always be the main character.
So before we end, we have some rapid fire questions. The first question is, what is your favorite color?
Oh, pink, easy.
When are you the happiest?
Oh man, I am the happiest when I have a glass of wine in hand, a good book, and it's like I have no responsibilities. So like my husband's with me and maybe my kid is just like quietly reading in the corner. Like that's when I'm happy. You know, and my dog in my lap, obviously.
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
18-year-old me, I would be like, okay, this is going to sound wild, but invest in like this weird thing called cryptocurrency so that you could be super rich now. But but also I would say really try like start taking care of your mental health and well-being, right? So for so long I was super anxious, and it's like, okay, you could just go to therapy and get help. You don't have to suffer. And so I think just I would tell 18-year-old me, like, it's going to be okay. Go to therapy. Everybody needs therapy, girl, and you're one of them. So go do that. And then also just like, you know, don't be afraid, because good things are going to come.
If you could have 3 people, dead or alive, for dinner guests, who would they be?
Beyonce, number one, Beyonce. Although I'd be so scared that I would say the wrong thing. That like, oh, okay, Beyonce. Let's see, who else? I feel like I want to hear all about the Harry Styles Don't Worry Darling drama. So I'm going to invite Harry over. We have to dive into this. Okay, and who else? Okay, Keke Palmer is one of the funniest people on this planet. And so just for that alone, like, girl, please come and let's have dinner. And it'll just be a good time.
That's a really good combination of people.
Right? Let's just and you guys too. Or you come with me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
What is a song that you have on repeat currently?
Oh my God. Cuff It by Beyonce. Like the energy of that song, I'm just like, what was going on in that studio that day for her that she just brought it? I have not stopped playing Renaissance since it came out. So like any of those songs really, but Cuff It is just, it's just perfect.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, that's really sweet. Okay, if I have a legacy, I think I would like it to just be that I created something that helped others feel more empathetic and feel more seen in this world. That's really all I hope for and all I want. So fingers crossed.
What is a book that you are currently reading, or a book that you would recommend?
Oh, So this is a little bit of an older recommendation. I think it came out last year, but it's so good. So it is called How Moon Fuentes Fell in Love with the Universe. It is by Raquel Vasquez Gilliland. So it is also a plus size Latina main character. And she, spoiler alert, has like these magical powers. And it's just such a beautiful story. It's about her and how she kind of feels like she lives in the shadow of her sister, who is thinner, and she's this like beautiful influencer. And it's all about Moon kind of coming into her own and figuring out how to harness that power instead of being ashamed of it. And it's just like the prose in it is so beautiful. I recommend it to everybody.
Well, thank you so much, Crystal. We learned a lot about you. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to sit down with us and talk. Can you let everyone at home know about any upcoming projects and where they could connect with you?
Of course. I have had so much fun. Thank you for all of these amazing questions and for you letting me be just a little chatterbox. So I'm currently working on a third young adult book that will hopefully come out next fall. And it is a fall themed book for our girlies who love the pumpkin spice, the apple crisp, and all of that. And it'll be a love story, like an exes to enemies to lovers. So if you like those tropes, there's a little something in there for you. And I'm going to be sharing the title kind of over the next month, I think. So I'm really excited about that. And if you want to follow along with me, I am Crystal Wrote, which is the past tense of write, pretty much everywhere, Instagram, Twitter, I'm even on TikTok, and my website is crystalwrote.com.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much again. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
such an amazing Latina storyteller. It's truly inspiring. And yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you both. It has been so nice to talk to you, and your questions were just amazing, and this was so fun.
Yay, I'm glad.
you.
I wish you nothing but the best. And
Thank
I'm
you.
looking forward to that book because you just said fall and then the like lovers tropes
The
that you
trope.
mentioned. I was like, oh, okay,
Yes.
I'm ready. I am ready.
Thank you. I can't wait. I love fall myself. So like, let's just do this and celebrate it.
Right. Yes. Well, I hope you have a lovely day. And
You
thank you again
too.
so much.
Thank you both. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Did you enjoy this episode? I hope you did, because you need to follow us on our socials at My Glendale LAC on Facebook and Instagram.
And follow us on Spotify and Apple or anywhere where you get your podcast from at Teen Gen Talks Podcast. Also, make sure to give us a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Glendale Library Arts and Culture, where we post a full episode videos every Friday at 4:30 p.m.